Okay, we're going to answer the question, how do you make shrimp bisque? And not just shrimp bisque, but all shrimp bisque, or all bisques, shellfish soups is really what bisque soup means. And as I'm making the soup, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about bisque soup, but we're going to get it started so I have something to do with you during the downtime on making the soup. First thing we're going to do is we're going to cook the mirepoix, the celery, carrots, and onions, and get that started. Take a little bit of butter. And we'll dump the mirepoix in there. Mirepoix again means celery, carrots, and onions. And we're going to put a little bit of the dried leaf thyme. And a pinch more butter. I want to make sure that I have enough oil to actually cook the veg. Remember, the butter, the oil, the duck fat, whatever it happens to be that you're using in the pan, it is the thing that transfers the heat from the metal to the food. The oil does. You have enough oil in there, heat doesn't get transferred, it builds up in the pan, and that's how sometimes things get burnt. So, what I did was I got some 45, 50 size shrimp here, frozen, which are perfect. I bought these raw, peeled and deveined with the tail removed. You remember when you make bisque soup, your shrimp needs to be peeled and deveined. I'm going to chop it up just a little bit. Now, I had a whole pound, but I saved about 6 or 7 shrimp because I'm going to show you how to use them for garnish in the bowl when we're ready to serve the soup later, okay? Just going to chop it up a little bit because keep in mind, everything that goes inside this pot is going to end up getting pureed anyway. Now, there are plenty of recipes for different kinds of bisque soups. What I will tell you right now is the common denominator among bisque soups. And now there are people that will disagree with this, but it's only because they haven't studied the history of this soup very well. Technically, there's really no such thing as a mushroom bisque or a tomato bisque because bisque soups are made with shellfish and white wine and mirepoix and garlic and sometimes tomato. And we might throw a tomato or two in here just for fun too. But I see in the public domain of cooking and retail purchasing, bisque soups are always made with shellfish and white wine and garlic and mirepoix and cream and white stock, you know. So the mirepoix, which is cooked enough for me, and I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. Okay, I'm going to add the shrimp to this now. And we're going to cook this just long enough for the shrimp to get cooked. Meanwhile, I'm going to show you quickly how I would normally puree my garlic. And that would be in the food processor. We don't need all that garlic, but over the course of cooking today, I might, you know. There you have it. Okay. Now, every time I add garlic to the soup, people who are watching say, that's way too much garlic. bisque soups get a little bit more garlic than you might think, and it doesn't come out in the soup as having too much garlic in it, ever. So keep that in mind when you see how much garlic goes in the soup. Okay, the shrimp is about half cooked, and I'm going to get ready to pour some white wine in there. And I'm going to show you a little bit about and talk to you about what burnt brandy is. And burnt brandy is when you take regular brandy and put it in a pan. This is something that's going to go into the soup later when it's finished. I believe this recipe calls for about 4 ounces, and I just put about 4 or 5 ounces in there. So burnt brandy, which is, remember now, brandy is simply concentrated white wine. And burnt brandy means that you light it, burn off all the alcohol, and all you have left is this concentrated, aged, usually oak barrel aged brandy. Now, whenever you put your brandy on and you want to burn it, be careful of one thing, and that is that it may just combust when it gets really hot. So you kind of want to control when it combusts, and you do so by getting it hot, just tip it. There it goes, okay? It did just combust. Now we're going to add the garlic to the mirepoix and the shrimp. That looked like enough, but I'll just put a pinch more. Now you can take this here and just set it down on your table anywhere you want and let it burn off all by itself. Now that you've brought the brandy to a boil, you can just let it sit off and burn off on the side. Okay, now we're going to add the white wine to the shrimp. And I believe my recipe calls for 2 cups, and that was about 2 cups, give or take. I could throw in a little pinch more in there. And we're going to reduce that down by 75%. Now, previously, I made some white chicken stock, and I boiled some converted rice, plain. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the rice to thicken the soup. We're going to puree all of these ingredients with the stock and the soup together. Now, this soup looks incredibly simple in some ways, and it is. But the most important thing to understand about the particular formula and methods that I'm employing in making the shrimp bisque soup is can be completely duplicated for lobster, oyster, crayfish. Those would be the 4 primary bisque soups on the planet: shrimp, lobster, oyster, and crayfish. Oyster is remarkably good if you like oyster also. Now, the question is, how much rice do you put in there? Every pot of soup that you make is just a little bit different. And the thing to remember is that add a little bit of rice and you puree it. And what we're going to do is we're going to batch puree the bisque soups in these little cylinders with a pureeing stick so that we can get it really nice and smooth. Because I don't intend on straining this soup when I'm done with it. I'm going to puree it as really as smooth as I can and then finish it like that. Believe it or not, the soup, this white wine is almost reduced because of the size and the width and the mouth of this particular pot. Now, if you have a taller pot that's got not as wide of a mouth, or a pot that just doesn't have as wide a mouth as this, period, whether it's taller or not, it takes longer to reduce. Now, the other thing we're going to do now is we're going to reduce the cream that is going to end up going into the recipe. And we're going to reduce that to the same consistency that we want the soup to be. That way we won't be changing the texture of the soup when we add the cream. Because we're going to create a soup texture and adjust it, and then we're going to add the butter and cream to it at the end, okay? I think this recipe calls for 2 to 3 cups of cream. So it depends how creamy you want it. I'll put 2 to 3 cups in there, and then we'll reduce it and find out how much we want to use. If we don't want to use it all, we won't use it.